let's discuss the three main facts about qualitative and quantitative methods. The first one is we have to acknowledge that there are foundational differences between qualitative and quantitative methods. So that's the main one that we have to think about. There are foundational differences. The second one is each of them has strengths and weaknesses. Whether you are choosing a qualitative approach for your study or quantitative approach, they all have strengths, but you also have to think there are some weaknesses that you have to be aware of. And lastly, there's a possibility that you can combine these two methodologies in your study. I'm going to talk about how to combine them to help you to address your research problem. First, let's think about what are the differences between qualitative and quantitative research. As you can see here, when you think about quantitative research, in general, you are making observation, and at the end of the day, you want to develop a theory. It doesn't necessarily mean that all qualitative study, you have to end up with developing a theory, but you are using inductive process. So you collect data and explore issues, and then one day you can develop a theory, and then quantitative focuses on conducting observation to test a theory. Observation means that you are collecting data related to the subject matter you are focusing on, and then you use that data to test a specific theory. So that's the main difference. Quantitative is all about deductive process. Qualitative is inductive process or way of reasoning. In terms of purpose, most of the time when you look at the purpose statement, when you're doing a qualitative study, you can see words like the purpose of the study to explore a phenomenon or describe using text. Sometimes you can say to examine or understand or explain or tell, maybe tell a story. And for the quantitative portion, when you are constructing the purpose of the study, you use words like determine, describe, with numbers. So you can do research just to describe variables using numbers, measuring specific variables and presenting the mean and the standard deviations of that variables you have measured. You can also use find out, measure, and count. And in terms of data, you already know, you might know that the qualitative focuses on non-numeric, focusing on collecting words from participants, developing themes to help to address your research question. Quantitative is more of collecting numbers, measuring something. We already talked about the mode of inquiry. So the mode of inquiry for the qualitative is inductive. You are using data to develop a theory, and then deductive is for the quantitative research, using data to test a hypothesis or a theory. So the next one is the type of research question. Most of the time, when you're doing a qualitative study, your research question is open-ended. Sometimes you have to start with how, why, or what. And then for the quantitative research, your research question most of the time is close-ended. Is there a relationship between these two variables? Let's say you are comparing two groups. Is the group A anxiety higher than the group B level of anxiety? So you are making close-ended statement or presenting close-ended statement and trying to use data to determine or answer yes or no based on what you found in the data. In terms of the application of findings, for the qualitative portion, you are transferring findings to similar situations. So that's why in qualitative study, you have to really describe the context so that future researchers can look at your context and see whether they can transfer your finding to similar context. So it's more of a transferability strategy. For the quantitative research, you can generalize, especially when you randomly select participants from the population, and based on what you found, you'll be able to generalize your finding to the population. Most of the time, when you're doing a qualitative study, you use small sample size. Sometimes you use 10, 11, or maybe 5, sometimes 1 participant, right? So in quantitative study, you use large number, maybe 100 or 120 or 170 or sometimes 300. These are the main differences between qualitative research and quantitative research.